News and views with myself, Salalo Makudir. The time is 8:55, and we're going to be switching gears now to a very, very important topic. We'll be heading over to Kenya, where there are some really, really interesting developments. For over 7 decades now, Palestinians have lived under military occupation, land dispossession, and apartheid laws. But beyond the bombs and the checkpoints that we know is their reality, there's another story, one that is less visible, but just as destructive. The political and economic systems that keep this machinery of occupation running. Multinational companies profiting from illegal settlements, governments that look the other way while weapons are traded, and powerful states that are blocking international action, even when the International Court of Justice has warned of a real imminent risk of genocide. Well, in Kenya and across the African continent, activists are asking the hard questions. Why should our governments, our companies, or our institutions be complicit in sustaining Israel's crimes? Why should it be business as usual with those who profit from apartheid and the genocide of the people of Gaza? And to help us unpack this, we're joined by Zahid Rajan. He's a member of Kenyans for Palestine and the Kenya Palestinian Solidarity Movement, who has been on the front lines of advocacy to expose and challenge the political economy behind Israel's apartheid system. Zahid, assalamu alaikum. Jazakallah so much for joining us. Welcome to News and Views. Really appreciate you giving us your time this morning.
Malaikum salam. Good morning. Thank you for having me.
No, the pleasure is all ours. I wanna jump right into it. When we talk about Israel's apartheid system, many people think of, or think only of military occupation and those images of checkpoints that we're seeing, and now this ongoing genocide. But you argue it's also industry. Can you explain a bit on that and what it actually means?
Well, Zionism and the role of Israel in Kenya goes back for a long time. I mean, we've had Israeli presence in Kenya since 1960s, and many of our security apparatus and the supply of arms and repressive techniques like tear gas and things has been prevalent and very widely used in the security forces. So just by having diplomatic ties, we've got the GSU, the NYS, which were modeled along the security formations within Israel. So we really have a very strong industrial, a very strong government-to-government contact with Israel, and that affects to a very large extent Kenya's economic ties and political ties and security ties with Israel.
Zaid, are you still there?
Yes, I'm still here. Yes.
All right. Yeah. What are some of the key ways? Yes, I can hear you. What would you say are some of the key ways multinational companies and I think this is important when you look at the BDS aspect of things, and also foreign governments that directly profit from or enable Israel's continued occupation of Palestine at this current moment?
So I think the BDS strategy is very, very important. We've got companies in Kenya that are economically tied to the trade with Israel. So we've got Carrefour, we got the Coca-Cola company, we got HP, we got other local outlets, in terms of food and drinks. So I think that it is important that people realize that by just shopping and just by supporting businesses that are present in Israel and are supportive of their apartheid thing, they directly support or are in one way complicit with the genocide. So the industrial reach into economies is very, very powerful. And that's one of the things that we do in Kenya is that we advocate a BDS strategy where we've got popular consumer items and shopping malls and products within the economy that we advocate for a boycott in order to put extra pressure on Israel and the world to disinvest from Israel and basically create a sanctions like systems like they did against apartheid South Africa.
Mm, mm. And I want to touch on that, the BDS aspect of it, and people boycotting products. Do you think that appreciation of the power of boycotts is still there, especially from a consumer's point of view? Do people understand that when they don't buy a Coca-Cola, or they don't buy an HP product, or whatever other product that is complicit in this genocide, they actually hurting them in the pocket? It's tangible. It means a lot. Do you think people still understand it in that way, in a way that ultimately, saw, as you mentioned, a country like ours, South Africa, gain its freedom and independence from the apartheid regime? Because I feel like, especially here in South Africa, the world is becoming increasingly a consumeristic based one, where people just want to get without even thinking that we could be hurting this business. For instance, I was thinking about Apple. They just released their new iPhone 17, and a lot of people were talking about the DRC and what's happening in that part of the world. But fast forward to the release of that phone, there were long lines in many South African malls. People going to buy that same Apple product, which is also complicit when it comes to the instability in the DRC region. Do we really understand the power that we have as a people, as consumers?
I think so. I think there are basically two things to say. One is that we have in Kenya we have big outlets, like KFC, like the Carrefour group of companies, like the whole Coca-Cola consumer thing. And so we've talked about this, and it's making a difference. But the other thing is, you see, people feel helpless in terms of how do we make a difference. I mean, you are so far away, you can't get involved in the war, and everybody's looking for non-violent methods of approaching and sort of putting pressure, on the world and on apartheid Israel, to withdraw from Gaza and from Palestine. But the question is, how do we concretely get people? And one of the things that we try to do here is to not only advocate boycott, but provide an alternative. So, what is the alternative to a to a supermarket that is tied to Israel? What is an alternative to Coca-Cola and its drinks? What is an alternative to HP and computers? What is an alternative to the Apple brand? I think it's important that we think concretely, because people need consumer items. I think that you can't get away. But I think to advocate sanction is good and it's productive and it's the way to go, but not to provide an alternative group of consumer items that people can use and move to is, I think, equally important. And also stress, the whole the whole idea of a non-violent response to what is happening to the ordinary citizen. I think people in their own lives and in their own everyday dealings with the economy would like to support Gaza, would like to support the Palestinians, but they need to concretely understand that not only do we boycott, but what alternatives do we have? And I think that should come across even in terms of the whole political economy, in terms of Kenya's trade with other countries, and what are the alternatives of getting the items they need.
And I think that's a very, very important aspect. I want to touch on African countries and African governments in particular, and how they interact with the genocide in Israel. I think they are fears that once you speak out and you are unequivocal of the fact that there's a genocide happening against the people of Gaza perpetuated by Israel, as a country you face bilateral relations that might be severed between yourself and the United States of America. We saw it here in South Africa, where after we presented that ICJ case, at The Hague against Israel, we started becoming a target of the United States. There was weird and propaganda that was thrown around, the fact that there's a white genocide here in the country, and there was issues of the tariffs and us being a foe of the United States overnight. How is Kenya dealing with those conversations? How is the government of Kenya and the people of Kenya interacting with that reality? And has the government, came out strongly to show their stance and their recognition of the fact that there is a genocide in Gaza at this current moment?
Well, for all it's worth, the Kenyan government, through its president yesterday, put out an official statement that it recognizes the state of Palestine, which is a welcome move, as so have other countries. The question is, how do you translate it to reality on the ground? In the sense that Israel has been one of Kenya's strongest economic partners, and obviously that is a part of the extension of proxy wars from the U.S. And what Kenya has done over the years is it has professed its non-aligned stance in the sense of, dealing with countries from the east and the west. But having said that, it is very clear where its emphasis have been. We have been the bulwark of imperialism and neocolonialism, in this part of East Africa, and we provided all kinds of support, to Israel and to imperialism, which is really sad. But I think, having said that, I think the two aspects I'd like to talk about is, one is what is Kenya doing. In the sense that if we now officially recognize the state of Palestine, we have an embassy here, with obviously, which now has a diplomat. What does that mean? Does it mean that we now recognize the state of Palestine? That means that any violations that happen and continue to happen in Gaza and in West Bank, will the government of Kenya, call in the ambassador of Israel and issue a diplomatic statement to say that we are extremely concerned about this and we demand an end to the genocide and to the end and ceasefire ASAP. I think that concretely has to be done. But will we then? I think it should. It's what Kenyans are sort of pushing for and saying, look, do we then? What is our trade relationship with Israel, and how do we negotiate that space? So in terms of because I think ultimately it will come down to putting your foot where your mouth is in terms of sanctions. So if you stop doing trade and you move to alternatives, I think that will sort of make a real difference. So that is and obviously Kenya is in a quagmire as far as all, especially African countries are concerned, is because of the U.S. support and the sanctions and the threats that happened to South Africa as well. That all African countries are wary of saying how much do we speak out, but now it finds legitimacy because the rest of the world has now spoken out in terms of recognizing the state of Palestine. But what does that mean? In my opinion, it's already too little, too late. 60,000 people, probably more. Probably double that in terms of unofficial figures have died. Gaza has become a wasteland. The attacks on West Bank is completely unacceptable. So what does it mean? Is that situation going to change, or is just that they've declared the status for the sake of it? But two is also at the African Union level, where we've got an African Union that has taken a stand against Israel. We basically stopped their presence within the African Union. They wanted observer status, and after a struggle of a year or 2 years, they were finally disallowed, which is good to say. So the African Union, as an Pan-African body, really needs to bring the African people together and say, what do we do in terms of making sure that we support our brothers and sisters in Palestine, because we have been through the colonial experience, of murder, occupation, mini genocides and so on and so forth. And Kenya has had its fair share of struggle in terms of the Mau Mau and other liberation struggles that paid the price, for an occupation by British colonialism. So, and I think it so have, we got colonialism, we got German colonialism, Portuguese colonialism, right across Africa. So perhaps that is the way to sort of, there's one way to sort of navigate this particular time and make our voice heard in support of Palestine.
No, most definitely, Zahid. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. Jazakallah so much for trading us, and yeah, keep up the wonderful work that you guys are doing out in Kenya. We see you.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you to South Africa for being our lead in terms of the struggle for a free Palestine. We really appreciate South Africa's bravery for all it is.
Most definitely. That was a member of Kenyans for Palestine and the Kenyan Palestine Solidarity Movement, Zahid Rajan, giving us insight on how Kenya in particular is dealing with the discourse around Palestine, this genocide, and most importantly, occupation as an industry, and unmasking the political and economic forces that are driving apartheid Israel system, and how us as Africans must start interacting with that reality. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, News and Views continues after this.